There we are. Right, and yes, grammar is the thing really that I'm talking about today, but as I say, there will be some overlap. We are very, very well known as Jolly Phonics and the first year, but in fact, we do a complete course and we go through to grammar as well. The grammar is just an extension of the phonics. They're not different, it's all part of the same thing. And just as a badly spelt letter, poster, a letter or a poster with bad grammar is equally off-putting to people who are reading it. So it is very important. And just like the spelling and the phonics side of things, we need to build up the children's knowledge a little bit at a time. As I say, we are a complete course. We go from the phonics handbook right at the beginning all the way through to grammar 6. I am sort of covering all of them today, but 6 years in an hour and a half is not a possible task. So what I'm doing is just picking out some of the basic themes and giving some ideas of how you might be able to develop them and use them in different ways within the classroom. Jolly Phonics is a systematic, synthetic phonics program. Systematic is fine, it just means you build things up, and the grammar is exactly the same. Synthetic, I never liked that word. To me, it means plastic, it means not real. But actually, when you look it up in the dictionary, what it means is the putting together of small elements, which fits beautifully with the reading and the blending side of things. But actually, it does apply to the grammar because, again, we're building up small elements, putting them together, learning different bits. So that still works. And phonics, obviously, it's to do with hearing the sounds and things, which isn't so much to do with the grammar. But anyway, as I say, we build up over the years, adding on to the children's knowledge as they go, which means, as you see here, they come in 2 forms: the handbook, which has black and white and photocopiable pages, or the pupil books, which are colour and the children write in them, right? They're just different ways of presenting. It is exactly the same material in both. They cover the same things, just a different way of presenting them because some people prefer one sort or the other. The other thing I would like to say is that just because you're teaching 3rd year, okay, it doesn't mean you can jump in at grammar 3 because the work is built up. If they've done a lot of grammar work and phonic work and other things, and you look at grammar 3 and you think that they can cope with it, then that's fine. But if you've not been teaching them through phonics, if you've not been teaching them the spelling patterns, if they've not been taught grammar, then to leap in at grammar 3 is not a good idea because there's going to be ideas and concepts that they don't understand. So if that is the case, you have to either decide if there are just a small number of things that they haven't covered and either cover them before you start, or as you go through the book and the things come up, do a little bit of an introduction or an extra lesson. Or you have to do a bit of a catch up, maybe half a term, it depends how old they are, you know, and how well they're doing, and then start on the grammar 3. Or sometimes if it's being introduced across a whole school, what they might do is actually just introduce things year by year and build it up. So the first year, year 1 and 2 will be doing the grammar handbook 1. Okay, and then the following year, obviously, those who did the grammar handbook 1 the first year will be able to move on to the grammar 2. So you need to adjust according to your situation and the children's knowledge and indeed the teacher's knowledge. So, you know, if you do need to do a little catch-up course beforehand, then, you know, if that's what the children need, that is what you should do. All of the handbooks have this strapline: handbooks for teaching grammar, spelling and punctuation. Okay, that in a nutshell is what we do, is what the course is all about. They are separate, but they are also overlapping in many ways. Okay, for spelling, if you're adding a suffix to make a past tense verb, there are rules around that. So that covers both. Again, so there's a lot of overlap, and what we do is try and teach in a way that makes sense to the children and build up their knowledge a little bit at a time, starting with the very simple and building up to actually very much more complex things. And as we go through today, remember, some of the things will be for 5 to 6-year-old children. Some of them, you're talking about children who are 9, 10, possibly even 11. So don't panic if you look at it and you think, oh, that's too easy or that's too difficult, because they're aimed at different age groups and obviously have to go through. And some of the activities that I'm going to be presenting, you could do in a very simple way with the little children, or you can make them more complex for the older children, but still having the same basic activity for them to do. So why Jolly Phonics? Right. Apart from being the best, obviously. If English is being taught, particularly as a foreign language or as an additional language, one of the first things we aim to do is provide children with a very good accent. Now, when Sue and I started off in the outer reaches of Lowestoft, we only thought it would be quite nice if some of the local schools, or possibly the UK schools, in a real stretch of imagination, might actually take on the programme. It never occurred to us in a million years that it would ever go beyond our shores. However, even within our school...
Fine, it's okay.
Oh dear. Joys of modern technology. Okay, so we were talking about a good accent, and that a lot of the places where we've been used, that's one of the things that they say, that children come away from this programme with a really good accent of English, often better than their teachers, partly because actually the palate is soft as a child, so you can learn to make different sounds. As you get older, it gets set and it is more difficult, which is why it's more difficult to learn foreign languages and make the sounds that are within that language as you get older. So we hope that children taught with Jolly Phonics have a good accent. We also hope, because we do cover all the grammar and whatever, that we have a wide vocabulary, not just nouns. I learned French at school. I remember drawing lots of pictures of the bathroom and the bedroom and labelling all the things in it, the toothbrushes, the sink, the toilet, whatever it was. And you get lots of books, My First 1,000 Words in Spanish, English, whatever, which is all very well. And I'm still very good at going round a house naming things in French. I'm not awfully good at putting together a sentence though. So, you need all the different types of words in a language and to know how to use them. And what we also want is to ensure that children understand how to read, write and speak English, because we're very greedy, we want a lot. Again, there's lots of people who say they've learnt something on the internet or in a book and they know how to read a language, but actually when somebody speaks to them, or they have to form a sentence and speak back, they don't know how to do that, or they haven't had a lot of practice at it, or they've learnt it all orally and they don't know how to write it. So we want nice, well-rounded children who can do all three things: to read, write and speak in English. So grammar is basically the rules that make up the language, how it's put together and how you use it. And in knowing those rules, we make sure that what we say makes sense. So in many languages, like Russian, Slovakian, the adjective comes after the noun. Okay, so I would like a sandwich cheese. Now, while if you asked at a cafe in England for that, you would be understood. It would seem incredibly odd, and they would know that English was not your native language, because in English, of course, the adjective goes in front. So I would like a cheese sandwich sounds much better, and it's what, you know, somebody whose native language English would say. So just learning that the rules will help lessen any mistakes that you make. And, you know, even when you come to something new, you can apply those rules to that new situation. You don't have to learn each situation as you go. So that's really why we're teaching grammar, to make sure that you and the children write exactly what you mean, not only because it makes you sound better and it makes the work that you are presenting better, but we have a little bit of joke in the jolly world that, of course, you know, it's very easy to get carried away, because you know what you mean to say, and you know what you've written or what you've said and what it means, but actually it's not always the case for your readers or listeners. I have to say, these days, having gone through the grammar program myself, I look sometimes at what I've written and I think, I don't mean that. So I'm a lot more careful these days. And I often look at ads or things on the internet and think, I don't think they meant that. Okay, but thinking about it makes you more aware of it. When you're speaking as well, we do speak in sentences, but we tend to just run on and we put in pauses and we say things, and that gives meaning and form to what we're doing. So let's eat grandpa. Okay, if I was saying it, I would say, let's eat grandpa. So I put a pause in, which indicates actually that I don't want to eat grandpa. Okay, we're going to eat, aren't we, grandpa? Okay, so poor old Snake, who is very greedy, is really a cannibal. However, in this sentence, he could be, but with the addition of a comma, obviously, grandpa is saved. So grammar can be very important, matter of life and death, or life and cannibalism. Right, so we start off very simply, okay? And I'm just going to say, as well as having children who can read, write and speak English, we actually want children who are going to be independent learners. We don't want them to be running to us for everything that they need, or having to go and speak to somebody. Sue talked about the 42 basic sounds that we use for the spelling side, because the words that we speak are made up of sounds, which is why we use the sounds and why we start with sounds that make the most number of useful words, and that we don't use the alphabet. But the alphabet is important. It does have a place, mainly as a means of ordering words, okay? Normally when we talk about the alphabet, we talk about the letter names, not the letter sounds, but the children do have to know both. And as you can see, we have the alphabet is divided into 4 groups, which we've color coded. And I'm told, I've not done it myself, that if you divide all the words in English, in the English Oxford Dictionary, the first quarter of words would be within the letters A to E, the next quarter in F to M, and so on. But it makes it easier for the children to cope with the alphabet, and we use it because actually we teach them to use the dictionary. Now, it's very, you know, it helps the children to be able to use the dictionary, but if they're going to use it, they've got to use it quickly and easily, or it is of no use. If they need to look up a word, if they want to know how to spell it, or any of the other things, okay, if they can't find it, it is no use. So we actually teach using the alphabet, using a dictionary, And our dictionary, if you've seen it, is actually colour-coded to match the alphabet. So the sides of the pages, the first set are red, then yellow, then green, then blue, which helps the children, instead of, if they want to look up the word vehicle, starting up the A pages and turning them over one at a time until we get to the back of the book, which takes far too long. So we try and make it as easy as possible. And there are lessons within the grammar which practice alphabetical order and using the dictionary, because it must be second nature, and the dictionaries must be out on the table if they are going to be of any use. Okay, it's no good having one between 30, which is on a shelf on the other side of the room. They're not going to use it. So in a dictionary, we can use it for a number of things. Obviously, we can check spelling with it. Okay, we can check spelling with it. We can look at the meaning of the word. We can find the part of speech, which is at the end where it says noun. And if you look at the top next to where it says mote, there's the word in slashes. Those slashes indicate it's a sound. And the O and the A have been joined together like our basic initial introduction of the sound to show that's a pronunciation. So even if children have never come across a word before, they can look it up, find the meaning, and find out how to pronounce it without having to come and ask anybody. So it makes them, you know, much more independent in looking up and acquiring new words. So, as I say, we actually teach using the dictionary, which is a very important skill. The grammar handbooks and the pupil and teacher books, the teacher books have got the teachers' pages separately, are all set out in the same way. And I know some of you have had training with Tina and Coral, but Tina always used to say to me, I don't know why they need training in grammar, she say. It's all in the book. They need to just read it. Okay, there is a lot of information in the introduction. And again, if you're using some of the higher grammar, like grammar 4 or grammar 5, it tells you everything in the beginning that you and the children need to know. But on the teacher's page, it also gives you a lot of information about the lesson. It gives you an introduction. It gives you the basic concepts that you need to know in order to teach it, some extension activities. So you don't have to have a complete and comprehensive knowledge yourself. Every time you go through it, every time I go through it, I learn something different. I learn something more. I add on to my knowledge. Okay, so it is all there if you read it. As I say, I am not going through in infinite. You'll be very pleased to know. I'm just going to go over certain ideas as we go, because there just isn't time this morning. So we need to build up knowledge in a logical, progressive, systematic way, because that's how we learn everything. If we're learning a musical instrument, a sport, you know, if we're learning football, we don't suddenly throw ourselves into a Premier League football match. We have to learn to kick the ball, to dribble, you know, to all the other skills that are involved within the game. So we start off very simply, looking at capital letters and sentences. Capital letters, sometimes the formation isn't as good, even in UK schools. We spend a lot of time looking at the lowercase formation, but not necessarily as much time looking at uppercase. So we check that. They need to know the sounds as well as the names of the letters, the capital letters, because obviously when they come in a word at the beginning of sentences, then they still need to be blended if the child doesn't know the words. So as well as using it for the dictionary, as I say, we need them for sentences. Because sentences start with a capital letter. So we talk to the children, as I say, about sentences. They start with a capital letter, they end with a full stop, and they need to make sense in between. that is a very basic definition of a sentence, but we are talking about very young children, and actually we don't need to go into all the many university level. No, but for us, as we learn more things, we add it onto the definition, so the children's knowledge grows slowly as we go. So we talk to them about sentences. Even our English children have difficulty actually with sentences, because, as I say, sometimes when we're speaking, we just run on and on and on. And small children particularly, you know, I went to the park and I did this and I had an ice cream and I went with my friend, and it's just a big long. So we actually sit in our circle, perhaps doing our news, and I'll say, I want one sentence. So I'll get them to say one sentence, whatever it is. I went to the park, and as they go, and I go, ah. So they get the feel of what a sentence is. And actually when they shut their mouth, or, you know, that's normally the full stop, because normally they're just running on with the and and the and and the and. And we say, well, think about it. When you get an and, it's possibly a full stop. So they get the feel of what a sentence is. Sentences with them. This is a complex sentence. I do realise that. The grammar course is multi-sensory. So we have actions and we have colours for the different parts of speech, which we will cover as the training goes on, which is why these words are in different colours. Not because I just think it looks pretty, but there is a reason for them, as we shall see. So we talk to the children about sentences, we get them to speak in sentences, and we have these scrambled sentences for them to do, because actually sometimes you don't need to just write and write and write, and particularly if they're younger children or if it's a foreign language for them, actually being able to physically move the words around, it makes it more interesting. They can make a mistake and it doesn't matter so much, because they can then read it through, change it round. They could chat in pairs about it. Once they've got the right answer, then they can write it down in their book, rather than writing something down, rubbing it out, having another go, rubbing it out, by which time you've got a hole in the book, it looks horrible, and they're quite depressed. So, as I say, it gives lots of experience of playing around with sentences. And we can, as I say, start off with quite simple sentences. Again, particularly if English isn't the first language, you can start with little sentence structures. So, she can see a bee. And also, we do something with a washing line, where we hang words on a washing line to make sentences up in the classroom, and then you can start moving words around and seeing what happens, or substituting different words in. And in fact, if we wanted to make this into a sentence, okay, what happens is you change the verb and the subject round. So, can I see a bee? So all we've done, and again, if you've got them on pieces of paper on washing lines, you can do that, and you can talk to the children about it, so that, again, they've had experience of it before you're asking them to write anything down. The other place we need a capital letter is for proper nouns, okay? Nouns are a part of speech, they're naming words. Proper nouns are the names of what we say important people, places, or things. So obviously their names are all important, our names are all important, so they would need a capital letter. And most of them know how to write their names, so it's a nice place to start with something that they're very, very familiar with. As I say, we are multi-sensory. So the colour for nouns is black, and the action for a proper noun is we touch our forehead, which actually is the British Sign Language sign for name as well. So they learn that their names, the names of the days of the week or the months of the year are proper nouns, and that they will need a capital letter. So we can look at different sorts of names, names of people we know. We can look at days and the months, which are also proper nouns and need a capital letter. Again, there's lots of poems and things about days of the week. Solomon Grundy, born on Monday. Monday's child is fair face. If you look in the literature, there's a lot of things that you could use. They can write a little diary. On Monday, I go dancing. On Tuesday, I go to English. On Wednesday, I have tea with grandma, whatever it is. And the same with the months of the year. I find the little ones are always very intrigued to think that the months of the year aren't always the same in all parts of the world. So that Australia, Christmas is in the middle of summer and they have it on the beach with a barbecue or a picnic, whereas we're in the middle of winter. And well, it's not normally snowing, but the weather isn't so good. So there's lots of widening educational opportunities that you can do. Also places, the Eiffel Tower, Buckingham Palace, countries, all need a capital letter because they are proper nouns. So of course the obvious thing to do is look at addresses. And again, we look at how you address a letter. Again, I find the children always amazed to find that different countries is written in different ways. Some of them have got, you know, the post boxes, or the county comes before this, you know, the state, and so we can look at the way different addresses are written. Depending on how old they are and what they're doing, they could send postcards to each other, to friends. If you have a pen pal system going within the school, there are things that you can write off for on the internet and things. There are places, free things for kids and whatever. So again, you can use that to reinforce the idea that all these are proper nouns and will need a capital letter. You can also use it creatively. And again, if you've got older children, they can think up what the address for a character from a book should be. They can design their own stamp. We actually revisit proper nouns in Grammar 3, by which time obviously the children are that much older and better and more skillful, we hope. So actually they could then write the letter that went within it. So either to a fictional character or from a fictional character. So there's ways that you can start off with the grammar, which is you know, a set of rules, and take it into the creative side of doing things. As I say, in Grammar 3, we revisit proper nouns and introduce the idea of proper adjectives. So Australian animals, the Australian is an adjective, but it's because it's an important place, that it's a one-off place that needs capital letter. You can use Google Earth, quite incredible. You can, you know, Google in on a place and go for a walk round, or look at like the Eiffel Tower, which is in the second one. Get the children to write postcards. Imagine that they're there for a holiday or something. So again, you're starting with the grammar, but you can move them on into doing more creative things from there. You can write directions, because you can actually on Google Earth go down and stand on Street View and see where you're going. So there's lots of ways that you can use it. We do build up gradually. I'm slightly going out of the order that we introduce things in, but because we're talking about going for a walk and giving directions, we teach prepositions. The colour is green, okay? And prepositions, they indicate how one noun sort of is related to another. And we talk about Inky going for a walk. He goes along a road. He goes under some trees. So we get the children to write a little story. As I say, get them to speak it first, then get them to write it down. Through the gate, under the bridge, across the road, along the path, between the trees, buy the cows, water the farm, all sorts of things that you can get them doing, practicing vocabulary. There are, again, books you can use. As I say, this is our picture. Very classic book now, Rosie's Walk. Very nice because you've got a hen and a fox, which are nice regular words for small children. Not a lot of words in the book, so plenty of opportunity for creative thought. So you can talk with the children about, you know, where the hen goes and the fox follows her. I won't spoil the story for you. And get the children to speak first of all, because we don't want them frightened of speaking. We want to have lots of practice of speaking before they write anything down. And there's also the good old bear hunt. We're going on a bear hunt. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no, we've got to go through it. So again, that's prepositions. And of course, the swishy swashy, like the grass, the noises that the things make, the squelchy squirchy, beautiful for phonics because you're having to think about the sounds. They can make their own sound words up. So there's lots of other things out there that you can use to broaden out the basic concepts that we're teaching. I have little cards like this. This is actually taken from one of our readers. And again, particularly if it's English as a foreign or second language, I can now control the prepositions that they're going to use. So they haven't got free choice because they don't know them all. But if we're working on certain words, then I give them to them on the cards. So I have a set of them. There's different things going on in them. So the monster road, along the road, by the shops, near the school, across the bridge, and under the willow tree. And again, I could also provide little cards with where he's going along. If I want to restrict the vocabulary or practice certain words that they're going to do, they can do it just like a little poem, just straight like this, or they could start with this and then expand it out, again, if they're older, to be a whole story with lots more detail and other such things in. But again, that's for you to judge according to the children that you are teaching. Their speech may be ahead of their writing, possibly, but again, get them to speak to each other, tell each other what they're doing, work in pairs, talk to the class. So provide lots of opportunity for talking as well as for writing. We go on to common nouns, which are also the names of things, but they're not so important. They're the everyday sort of objects. So it's not an important chair, it's just any old chair. It's not an important table, it's any old table. And again, it's a very rough rule of thumb, but we tell the children that if they can take a picture of it, it is probably a noun. So that's what we do. We either pretend, or if you're in a very rich school, you can do your digital camera, and we go and take pictures of things, or just have a little frame and they look through it. The other thing that you can say is that if you can put an a or a the, an article, a definite or indefinite article in front of it, again, it's probably a noun. The rabbit, a rabbit, the owl, an owl. Okay, so the indefinite article an is when the next word has a vowel sound at the beginning of it. Not a vowel letter, but a vowel sound. So owl, it does begin with an O, but because it's an owl, which is a vowel sound, it's an. But something like hour, an hour, right, it begins with an H, H-O-U-R, but the first sound is ow again, which is why that will have an in front of it rather than an A. It is covered within the programme, but as I say, at this very basic level, really, what we say to them is that, you know, they can have a look at things, and if they can see it, then they, you know, take a picture of it. It's probably a noun. We've got an example of some work here. We've got the little sort of camera shape at the top, and they've managed to get the picture of the child in it, which is lovely. And then they've gone round and they've been outside in the garden, and made a list of things and a list of things in the classroom. Okay, so lots of vocabulary work here, obviously. Again, you can make up class books with pictures or photographs and things in. And you can use sentence structure. Again, if English is not their first language, I can see a swing. I can see the swing. So we're changing the articles. There is a, here is a, get them to ask questions and answer. There is a, is there a, okay. All these things we can build in with what we're learning to broaden out the scope and to make sure that their command of English is very good. Where is the table? Here is the table, right? All sorts of just little things, but it will make them much better in their use of English. Nouns, on the whole, are people, places and things. So again, you can sort things out into the different groups, either with pictures or with the words, but it's, again, a way of helping them to remember what nouns are. And again, at the early level, we do comprehension. So they need to understand what's being said or what they're being read as well. So yes or no questions are a lovely way in. It's very simple. This is a cat, yes, no. Is it black? Yes, no. This cat is actually orange, except in English, orange cats are always called ginger. Okay, a little, just something that I have no idea why they're ginger, but they're ginger. They're not orange. They're never orange. They're ginger. Ginger Toms. Okay. You can also do them as true or false questions, but yes or no is simpler for small children. I can see a dog. Yes, no. So from this one picture, you know, we've got a whole range of questions we could ask the children to check their comprehension. You can put them on little cards, and I have cups, just paper cups, yes, no, and you give them a sentence and they put it in the yes cup or the no cup, which means I can then just go around afterwards and check if they understand, because if it's in the right cup. And again, you can do that as a group or a pair, which will mean talking. Trees can run, no they can't. The children can draw little pictures if they want to illustrate some of them, or they can write their own sentences, which then the children, you know, the other children can have a go at sorting out into the yes or no answers. So from a very simple little exercise, we've got a number of different things that we can do in order to keep everybody going. Nouns also can be plural. The simplest way of making a plural in English is by adding an S. It's not always, but we also cover adding ES if it ends with a ch, a sh, a s, or a x. As you can see at the bottom, we add an ES. And within the programme, we also cover where a word ends in Y and we add the IES and the rules for that, and irregular plurals. There is our pull-out plurals in the back of the handbook, the template for it. So one ladybird, but 3 ladybirds. And again, they just have fun pulling them out, and it's a way of practicing without just writing loads and loads and loads and loads of things down. And again, if I want to restrict their vocabulary and make sure they practice certain words and don't try and use some with the plurals that we don't want them to use, I can just make little cards and give them to them and they use those. And again, I just have a box and they can sit and play with them and go through them if they've got a few minutes to spare or they want to. And we want to try putting all this information together and doing other creative things with them. So The Very Hungry Caterpillar is a very famous book. I'm sure most of you know it. So I do my own version, The Very Greedy Snake, because if you know within our work, Snake is always hungry. He is very greedy. So on Monday, Snake eats an orange. So, okay, we've got days of the week, which we've been talking about, which is a proper noun. So that's got a capital letter. We know to put that in. Snake, although it is a a name of an animal, it is his name, so he has a capital letter as well. He's not a orange, but an orange. Okay, so we're building in all the things that we know into something else that we are writing. So on Tuesday, he eats 2 pies. Okay, we've got our plurals in there as well. On Wednesday, he eats 3 bananas. And again, you know, you can change what he eats to be whatever you are working on at the time. On Thursday, he eats a whole load of bread and some honey. On Friday, he eats a big bowl of olives. And on Saturday, he eats a tray of cakes and drinks 10 cups of tea. And not surprisingly, on Sunday, he eats nothing because he feels very sick. Again, we are using all the things that we have been teaching them in quite a simple way to produce a little story or book or whatever. So it's just as I say, a way of using what you're teaching rather than just teaching in isolation and moving on and not doing anything with it. So you talked about compound words. We teach about those, and the last spelling word in grammar 1 is always a compound word because it's a good way of introducing them to long words, and you don't want them to be frightened of long words. Some are quite straightforward, so a blackbird is a bird that is black. Some are not. A ladybird hasn't really got anything to do with ladies or birds, other than it's got wings. So the bird templates are in the back of the book, and so for some things I might have pictures that go with it. So again, I can have boxes of them and they can practice matching them up and learning the vocabulary if it's not necessarily obvious. Sometimes I write the word on the card, sometimes I don't. It depends on the level that the children are learning. But again, you can then widen that out. So there's a Bad Tempered Ladybird book, again, another very famous book. You could get them to do writing or learn about ladybirds in science, just factual writing. Here we've also got some adjectives which relate to the ladybird. So again, we're taking one small thing and broadening it out to make it more interesting and relevant. In the spelling, we also have what we call silly sentences to try and help children remember which words take which spelling. So all the IE words, tie my tie, eat my pie, and I like to ride my bike. We have a lot of, I lick to ride my bix here. That's one year. I have to correct that one again, you know. But making up collections of words to help children remember. But again, if you've got older children and with the higher levels of grammar, you can do a similar thing, but perhaps change it more into sort of a little poem. So this is a slightly older child. It doesn't have to make sense, but they've written a little piece using all the OA words, which is quite fun. Again, but very simple and just carries on from what they've already been doing. This is one of the grammar 3 or 4 spelling sheets. Okay, and if you can see across the top, you've got all the books, and the book titles are all to do with the spelling lesson of the week. So they can make up their own book titles. The books have yet to be written: The Evil Weevil and the Gerbil, Tendrils of Fear, Death in April. They're all connected to the spelling words. One Tranquil Summer, The Fossil Hunters in Peril. Okay, and having made up their books, of course, they'll need to write the stories, won't they? So again, even just, you know, like the spelling words on the sheet, okay, they're vocabulary, but there are things that you can do with them, you know, to broaden out what we're doing. These ones come from the top of the pupil books because they're in colour. And again, you could make up a story from any one of those or from all 3. And all of them, I mean, Lib is so fantastic at getting in things and details. I still look at them however many years later and find new things I have never seen. Will have something to do with the words that you're using. So Lots of ideas you can use to broaden out what you're doing and to make it relevant, not just learning lists of words. So we move on in grammar 3 and we talk about collective nouns. Okay, collective nouns are the words that we use for groups. So say we're building up, we've done proper nouns, we've done common nouns. Now we start telling you about collective nouns. So there are certain ones that are correct, that always go with it. So a flock of birds, a bunch of flowers, a forest of trees. Okay, if it is English as a second language or a foreign language, it's probably best at least starting with the ones that are real. And there's lots of them, and there are examples and matching pictures and collective nouns in the handbook. But of course, again, you can use it creatively. You can get some lovely work from the children. So what could the collective noun for octopuses be? A wriggle of octopuses, a cuddle of teddies, a twirl of dancers, a scream of monsters, a stripe of tigers, a float of balloons. Again, you could get them to draw them out, make a class display of them, make a book of them. It's just playing about, you know, with the language. And the children like it. It's quite good fun. And again, you can find books with examples in for them to do. After collective nouns, we move on and teach concrete and abstract nouns. Now, concrete nouns go with our photography and the idea that you can take a picture of it. Abstract nouns are a bit more esoteric, okay? Abstract nouns, you can't necessarily take a picture of. The tide, okay? It's a thing, time. It's the name of something, but I can't really take a picture of it. Again, this is where that if you can put an at or a the in front of it, can help. Because the tide, the time, okay, it can help help the children identify. But again, they're older children, but we're talking about more abstract content. Countable and uncountable nouns. Okay, we've talked about plurals. So sometimes rice, I don't talk about grains, individual grain of rice and grains of, you know, if sand is just a big mass. I can't count how many there are. So we go over those. Recipes are a good one with this because a lot of things we use in cooking are uncountable nouns. Flour, sugar, rice. So you can get the children writing their own recipes, and actually writing recipes is a skill. You know, they have to put the ingredients, they have to order their thoughts, they have to be able to, you know, give instructions. So that's a way to transfer the grammar over again into the creative. And of course, they can write about their favourite dinner, their favourite meal, their favourite biscuit, whatever it might be. But again, you can also take it into the realms of creative. The imaginary recipes. You could write a recipe for dried frog pills. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a very great fan of the late and greatly missed Terry Pratchett. But how would you create dried frog pills? Harry Potter's got lots of things in, you know, butterbeer, all these things that you could think about what they could be in. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you know, all those marvellous sweets and things that he's got in there. This is another top from one of our spelling sheets. What are those sweets? What do they do? Give them a fantastic name. How would you make them? George's Marvellous Medicine. Again, lots of mixing of potions and, you know, what have you. Here are Snakebee and spiders, I think it is. All making a potion for something. What are they making a potion for? What's in it? You know, you've got an opportunity there to have a fantastic story coming. This is my lovely friend Hema Chanda from Word Masti, who I have to acknowledge because actually she has very kindly giving me a number of the photographs and things that we're using today, and some of her children's work, which is very, very kind of her. And we have Zena's collective noun quadrant. So again, we are mixing the collective nouns with the recipes. We're overlapping, we're using all the information we know. A bunch of skeleton keys, a mischief of rats, a cluster of spiders, a rattle of bones, all going into the cauldron. It could just be ingredients, okay? It doesn't have to be collective nouns. It could just be, you know, magic ingredients, but all different ways of using it. And I love the fact that it, you know, it goes down into sort of a slit or a top, down into the cauldron. I think it's, you know, fantastic. So really good idea. We teach adjectives. The colour for adjectives is blue. And obviously the nouns are all on our head, proper nouns, common nouns. So adjectives we're adding on to nouns because they're describing nouns, they're telling us extra things about them. Colours are all nouns. So again, go over colours, lots of colours. You can make pattern snakes like the big one along the bottom. Again, there's templates in the back of the book. You can talk about the snakes. But it doesn't have to be snakes. As long as you teach them what an adjective is, it doesn't matter how you do that. Okay? The picture of the fish, they're all different coloured fish. They could do different coloured fish. That actually comes from a book called Patrick by Quentin Blake. And good old Elmer the elephant. Okay? They can all make lots of different coloured elephants. Be friends with Elmer. You're moving over into art and design because they could paint them as big ones. You can make a herd of multicoloured elephants. All sorts of things to take it just off the page and just being a collection of flowery, stripy, silvery, metallic, whatever it might be, but you know, into something more meaningful. I love this. This young man has written some adjectives to describe himself: smart, kind, tall, intelligent, brave, naughty, and thin. Again, you know, you could take characters from books and put their face at the top and write a set of adjectives to go with them. And again, the gingerbread man, all sorts of adjectives to describe the gingerbread man. You can make gingerbread, you can read the story, you can act the story out. They can write it using as many adjectives as they can. Imaginary creatures are great for adjectives, you know, unicorns, mermaids, castles, and have adventures. Okay, we've got the scary, huge, green, hairy monster here. You know, so you start, well, where does he live? What does he eat? They can all make up their own monsters and draw pictures of them. So again, lots of creative opportunities within this. As I say, it doesn't have to be snakes, could be anything. If you're English, the order of adjectives, and English is your native tongue, the order of adjectives is something that you do automatically, very people know explicitly, but there are certain things, if you said it in the wrong order, like the sandwich cheese, you know, everyone will go, what? And it's not quite right. So we go over the order of adjectives. This is actually grammar 5, so it's quite a long way up. We start off by just looking at all the different ones that we could have, like in a grid. But obviously you can refine that down. We've got, you wouldn't need 7 adjectives every time. In fact, that would really not be very good, but you just pick some out. So a scary, huge, wet, spotty Martian. Again, they could draw a picture of it. Who had an enormous new shiny Martian spaceship. Okay, so we're talking about, again, we've got an enormous. It's an an, not an a. So every time you can reinforce things that you've taught and things that you are learning. And of course, the reason he came down to Earth was because he wanted a lovely Indian meal. Okay, so again, these are noun phrases. So just a few adjectives describing a noun. We'll come back to something on there that the sharp-sighted of you will have spotted in a minute. But again, you can make up lots of, you can have plastic cups with the determiners, opinion, shape and size, condition and age, and have the words and lolly sticks or something in them, and they pick some out and then have to make up a phrase or a sentence or something about it. Lots of ways of using them. Now, I said they were phrases. They're phrases because they have no verb. So when they start learning about verbs, which is down in Grammar 1, we explain that as well as being a doing word and having the colour red, every sentence must have a verb. So we're adding a little bit of information on. So we have bees as our sort of symbol for verbs, because obviously bees are very busy doing. The bees kick the football, they skate across the grass, they swim in the pool, they paint a picture, they're cleaning the hive. There's lots of verbs going on in that picture. There are lots of vocabulary you can do with the children. In the hive, in the little hexagonal cells, we have the infinitives, so to sleep, to brush, to read, to play. So we can talk about the infinitive with the children. So sort of the word family. And again, we use them when we start teaching them. We can use them creatively. Back to our ladybirds. So what sort of verbs could the ladybird do? It flaps its wings, it runs along the twig, it stops at the end, it jumps into the air, it flies across the garden. So again, little poem or story, or they can carry it on. The child's work on the left is from a book which is about ladybirds, and they've been picking out all the verbs they can find within that book and the things that are doing them. So again, it's teaching them something and then letting them use it in order to, you know, really master it themselves. Lots of stories about ladybirds. They're, you know, very good. We can play Inky Says. So again, a way of getting children talking. We have a game called Simon Says. I'm not sure, I don't know whether you know it, but you know, Simon says stand up, Simon says sit down, stand up. But if Simon hasn't said it, you shouldn't do it, you know, you're out or whatever. So Inky says run, and they will run on the spot. Inky says hop, they will hop on the spot. Sing, Inky hasn't said it. But of course, each child could take a turn at being the one saying the word, so they're practicing speaking. The other children are practicing their comprehension because they're having to listen and they're having to do the verb. And again, you could have a pot of verbs that you're working on, so the children don't even have to think of them themselves, and they can do, you know, you can do that as a little activity. They can play that on their own in groups, but again, you're practicing what you've been teaching within the grammar. So we have actions for all the parts of speech, and a bit like the Inky game, you call out a word, so India. They do the right action, a proper noun. If it's a proper noun and it's like this, what does it need? Capital letter, that's right. Common noun, carpet, okay, or brush. Now, sometimes what you'll get is some of them going brush, a noun, some of them going verb, to brush, and of course, it can be both. So you've just introduced a very complex grammatical system, idea to them very, very simply. Because yes, sometimes it's a noun, sometimes it's a verb. It depends what job it's doing in the sentence. Some words are always one thing, some words aren't. And actually, children just go, oh yeah, fine. It's only adults sometimes that go, oh. Okay, because you're teaching them, they you know, take all this on board and it's, oh yeah, fine, no problem. Okay, so again, you can have the children come out and call out words they know, the other children to do. You're practicing talking, listening, understanding. Verbs obviously happen in time, either in the past, the present, or the future, very simply. So they learn Spanish on Friday afternoon, which is the present. The race will start in the park, so future. There are those who say that there is no such thing as a future tense, it's just the future because it hasn't happened yet. But as I say, we're, you know, we just use what works. She brushed her hair, brushed being in the past tense, okay? And we have actions. So present, now, future, you point in front of you, brushed at the back. So again, you can have little sentences like this. You read them out, or the children read them out, and the other children have to decide which tense they're in and do the action accordingly. The great thing with actions is if you've got a group of children in front of you, it's quite easy then to work out who's with you and who's not really understanding, because the ones who are there first doing whatever the action is know it. You don't need to worry about them. The ones that are watching the people next door or not doing it at all are obviously the ones that haven't got it, and they're the ones you will need to pick up, possibly separately, or to give a little bit of more teaching to. But as I say, within a group, actions are great at actually working out who's got it and who might need a little bit more. You can get them to change the tense of it, so they learn Spanish on Friday afternoon, or they will learn Spanish on Friday afternoon. The race started in the park, okay? So playing about with the language, lots of things just with little sentences. We start with simple tenses, obviously, and we build up to 9 tenses altogether. And we have our tense, so be careful when you say that, especially with a list. With the simple, the continuous and the perfect. They are explained in the book. I'm not going to go through it all here because this morning is too short, so I don't have enough time. And the past, present and future. But this grid within the tent gives them a visual, an idea that they can hang on to when they're talking about the tenses. And then they can fill in the various little sections. As I said, it gives them something to hang on to rather than just a big mass of things that they have to remember. And I was asked this question, so I have added this in. This again is where grammar and spelling and things collide and overlap. So if we have a word like hop, or it's got that short o in the middle. If we want to make it into the past, and we want to add the suffix ed, okay, if we do it straight, now in English, if you have 2 verbs that come together, they generally make the sound of the first one. So in our original digraphs, in a word like rain, r, and then you've got the a, which is an a, and n. So it's not a, r, a, n, it's r, a, n. It's making the long sound of the first one. Because the second vowel is what is changing the sound of the first one. Now actually, the vowels can do that if they are 1 letter apart. So actually, this doesn't say hopped anymore, because that e is changing, it's hopping over that p, it's changing that o to an o, so that's hoped. So what we have to do is when we have a short vowel with a consonant after it, we have to double that consonant before adding suffixes like ed or in, okay? Again, it is all explained in the book, and there are lots of exercises for the children to do in order to get them to understand it and to practice it and to get really good at it. We do parsing. Now, do you remember what I was saying about the job that something has? Depending on the job, then it depends what part of speech it is. So we are talking, we can parse a verb. So is it singular or plural? Okay. Is it first, second or third person? Past, present or future? Simple or continuous? So we get the children doing all these, they get really good at it, and they get lots of practice at it. And it's very simply explained within the books. By the time we get up to grammar 5, we're talking about things like phrasal verbs. Okay, now phrasal verbs, where there is more than one word. So it's often a preposition, but the boy, to take off, is different than take. The boy took off his boots. You need both words in order for the sentence to make sense. And it means something different to the original verb that it started from. We could also have the horse took off across the field. So it ran off at a great rate across the field. Okay? Or the rocket took off into space. So we look at lots of examples of those, which again, if you're a native speaker, you just automatically take in this knowledge. If you're not, again, it's something that you need to learn, that this is a phrasal verb and it's meaning different, and it's not off just as a preposition that has to be within the sentence. So we do lots of work connected, and it's examples. We do also cover idioms within them. So English people often say it's raining cats and dogs. It's not really raining cats and dogs, obviously, but we do touch on things like that because you know, you have to be able to understand these things, otherwise you wonder what on earth is going on. Sue talked about syllables, breaking words up into bits. Syllables go around the sounded verb. So like blue bell, and we talk about chin bumps. Blue bell, if your chin bumps your hand, it's likely to be a syllable. You have to exaggerate the words a little bit. But why I say the sounded syllable is in something like jumped, J-U-M-P-E-D. You have got two vowel letters, but they're not both sounded. Jumped, jumped. You've only got one syllable there. Where if you've got hunted, hunted, you have got two sounded syllables. So we can use this knowledge in things like haiku, a Japanese poetry form, okay, which has 3 lines, 17 syllables, which are organised as a 5-syllable, 7-syllable, 5-syllable. Okay, so we have an example. So a spider drops down, dangles by a silken thread, hovers, and is gone. Okay, but again, they've got to count their syllables, they've got to think about their words, and it's not a huge thing because it's only 17 syllables long. But you can get the children writing these, and again, young ones can write very simple ones, older children can write much more complex ones. You also have tanka, which is just another form that has 5 lines, 31 syllables. The first line has 5 syllables, 7, 5, 7, 7. You can find these, you know, on the internet and things. Sonnets, if you're talking about much older children or adults, Shakespearean sonnets, okay? They're all certain lines and certain numbers of syllables. Lots of poetry is connected with syllables. We also have things called cinquains, which are 5 lines, 22 syllables. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, and then back to 2. So the last line with the 2 syllables should be something a bit punchy. This fits quite well into English. So I've got an example. A web, beautiful and delicate silk, woven by a master spinner. A trap. Okay, so they have goes at writing poems such as that. And of course, this day and age, it's not technically syllables, I have to say. But of course, good old Twitter and tweets, restricted writing, it was 140 characters. It has now gone up to 280. All right, so that's not syllables, that is actually literally letters and the spaces in between. But it's still having to think very carefully about what words am I using, are they necessary, you know, do I need them, refining what they're writing, what they're thinking down. We cover pronouns. Again, they've all got actions. I, you, he, she, it, we point to the floor. We, making sure they take in themselves. You, point to some other people. They, we normally point to the next door classroom. Okay, and immediately when you put them out like that, somebody says, why have you got two yous? Okay, so you can explain that the first you is singular, as in you, and the second is plural, as in all of you. Okay? But putting it out like that makes it obvious, rather than just thinking they're going to pick it up, or they hear it and don't understand why it means both things. You can add your verbs to your pronouns. I look, you look, he, she, it looks, we look, you look, they look. And again, they pick up immediately. Oh, look, he, she, it. It's got that S on the end for looks, that third person singular. Okay. Again, you talk about it with the children, you find it. You can practice with lots of different verbs, the verbs that you're talking about. I jump, you jump, he, she, it jumps. You know, practicing putting that S on the end. Pronouns can also be possessive, so they show who it belongs to. My book, your book, his, her, its book. No apostrophe there, by the way. Our book, your book, their book. Okay? It is also not just a possessive pronoun, but they are possessive adjectives, because as I say, they're describing who they belong to. So it could be both. It is both. It's a possessive pronoun and it's a possessive adjective. And they might see or read about them, particularly as they get older, described as either way. Okay? But you've addressed this and they know this and it doesn't throw them, and they thought, oh, but I thought it was I thought it was a pronoun. I didn't know it was an adjective. Okay? But I'm saying, you know, you go over it and you show how it works. And they're, you know, then they are equipped with the information they need, not just for now, but for when they go on into the future. We deal with the subject and the object of a sentence. So if we take that first sentence, you know, we've talked to them. A sentence must have a capital letter. A sentence must have a full stop. A sentence must make sense, and it must have a verb. So we start off by identifying the verb. Okay, because we've used the colours. If you're on a computer, it's easy because you can change the colour. You can use a highlighter pen, you can underline it with felt tip, you know, all sorts of things that you can do. But so we've identified the verb. So what we can say to them is actually a sentence must also have a subject. And the subject is the thing that is doing the verb. So in this case, it's the cat, and we put a box around it. Okay, so all sentences will have a subject. Most sentences, but not all sentences, will have an object. In this case, it's a mouse because the object has a verb done to them. So the cat is doing the chasing, the mouse is being chased, so we put an oval around that. So they're starting to analyse the sentence and find out the things about it. The subject of it is important in other ways as well. So we always have a joke here about the Queen. My husband and I, and then people say, oh, is it my husband and I? Is it my husband and me? My friend and I, my friend and me? Oh, I don't know. But it's quite easy. And I have a little sort of poemy thing. So I hugged Granny because I am the subject, but Granny hugged me because in that case, I am the object, I'm receiving the hug. You hugged Granny, Granny hugged you. He hugged Granny, Granny hugged him. She hugged Granny, Granny hugged her, and so on, okay? So it explains why it changes and which you use. So if you're writing my husband and I, are you writing it as the subject of the sentence, or are you writing it as the object of the sentence? And this little poem, obviously, you can do in lots of different ways. You can put, the dog loves me. I love the dog loves me, you know. All the different verbs that are there. So you can mix it about and get them to play about with it and write little poems based on that with different verbs, different people, practicing the subject and object pronouns. Okay. Verbs need to be described just as much as nouns do. So verbs are described by adverbs. They often end in ly, but not quite. Again, this is from the big book, and there's lots and lots of verbs and things going on in the picture that you can talk to with the children and get them to talk about it. Inky and Bee have got their little picnic down there, which at the moment it looks like Inky is eating very messily indeed. Okay. So again, you can go over lots of adverbs and the vocabulary and what they mean, revising verbs at the same time with them. We play the vocabulary. So one of the children comes out the front and they pick up a card with an adverb on. They don't let anybody else see it. Okay, that's just for them. And then I will have cards, or if they're older and their command of English is better, they can think up their own verbs. But they get a verb card and they'll say shout. So they have to shout loudly. Sometimes it works better than others. I'm not sure how you swim loudly, but you know they enjoy having a go at trying to show what the adverb is carefully. So they might have to eat carefully and quickly. So again, it's a game you can play over and over again, which practices the verbs and the adverbs that you have been learning, and they think it's a game. They don't really see it as learning, you know, as if they were writing things down on a piece of paper. One of the things about grammar is it's very difficult to measure how well you're doing. You can get a reading age, you can get a spelling age. There's lots of assessment things on the market, and you can say, oh, my children are working 2 years above their chronological age. You know, aren't I marvellous? There is no test like that for grammar. But one of the things that they look for, you can look for to see how your grammar is working, how well you're doing, is by if their writing is interesting, it's got more detail, it's got more complex sentence structure and things in it, it's got more detail in it. And actually, you know, again, we spend a lot of time trying to teach children about thinking about words, playing about with words, thinking about the words that they're using. So like with the haiku and the tweets, you have to be really careful because you can't just run on and on and on. You have to, you know, distill the essence of what you want to say. So we have an expand a sentence exercise for them to do. So we start off with a very simple sentence and we say, well, you know, it's a sentence, it's fine. It's a bit boring though, isn't it? So could we add an adjective to it? So we ask them to add an adjective. You know, so the small hairy dog or the large fierce dog, whatever they can think. And how did it bark? Because we've done adverbs as well, so we can describe how it barked. How did it bark? And we explain to them that by adding these little details and these extra bits, the sentence becomes more interesting. So, the dog barked has become the curious, fluffy dog barked excitedly at the small gnome-like couple who had suddenly appeared in the garden, because we've expanded it out as to who are they barking at and things, okay? You can do that exercise with the children and then you end up with a whole set of much more interesting sentences. Some of them work really well, some of them won't be so good, but again, they're story starters. They can write the story, they can pick one and write the story that it goes with. Somewhere in that story, they have to have that sentence. You know, and they love the fact that it's their sentence that's been chosen or that they're using. And again, you can have a couple of them that they made, and you know, you need something to do, something's come up, just pick one out and use it. Again, pick one out, get someone to read it, speak it, and then orally tell a story about it. because again, we don't just want them writing, we want them speaking as well. And again, you know, you've got a few minutes, you finished early, something's happened, pull one out, get them to talk about it. Lots of talking, working in pairs, because they need to be confident in talking as well as writing. And talking in front of your peers isn't as frightening as talking in front of 1,000 grown-ups who probably all know as much as you do. Okay, so the more you get them talking, the more confident and the easier that will be for them to then just carry on and do it. So what you hope, as I say, they get better words. We have in grammar 2 is the end of, and we think about thesauruses, which, you know, different from the dictionary, but equally important, and expanding their vocabulary. And we want them, as I say, you know, to produce writing that is just, you know, more interesting than just repeating phrases or sentences that they've heard or seen or read. You know, we want them to be able to use the language as they feel they want to. So this is a word web filled in with lots of different words connected to happy. They mean almost the same thing, not necessarily, but nearly. That's one from the book, which someone's filled in and beautifully coloured in, I may say. There's lots of examples of the ones that you can do in there. This is a piece of free writing from year 5. Finally, I'm free. No more years of being enclosed in a cramped room. I soar up into the azure sky, straight towards the scorching sun, until I feel it burning on my back. So I swiftly swoop down right until my fingers are slicing through the dark seawater. Okay, it's a fabulous piece of work that this little girl, you know, has really thought about, you know, the words she's using and you know, what's going on. So, you know, this is the sort of thing that we are trying to aim for. This is that they'd had a trip to the Globe Theatre, Shakespeare's theatre, and then they had to write a poem. Some of them were very, you know, it was a round theatre, it had got a thatched roof, very, very factual. But this one is, you know, there's more to a theatre than stone and bricks. It's built on love. And we talk about homophones because, again, if you're English, even so, if it's a native language, you don't always know, they get them mistaken. Words that sound the same but are spelt differently. We have lots of them. We have lots and lots and lots of them, and some of them are very common. When you're speaking, it doesn't matter. No, I can see the C, as long as we've got the word see, who cares how it's spelled, because we can hear, we know what it is. But when you're writing it down, that's not the case. Okay? So we do go over a lot of homophones within the programme. And in fact, your grammar can help you with this. Okay, there, a position word, here, there, where. There it is, where is it? Okay, there sounds exactly the same, but it's a possessive adjective. We've talked about those, describes who it belongs to. They are, short for the verb they are, okay, part of the verb to be. If you know your grammar, you know which homophone you need. It will help you, okay? And you will then never make this mistake. So fun, they won't even know they're learning. Okay? I won't be sending my child there. Right, we talk about punctuation. As I say, we had the comma saving poor old grandpa at the end there. And we start off with speech marks, okay? And we start very simply. We look at, you know, like comics, which children are very familiar with, and animal sounds, you just put them in the speech marks. I was quite amazed when I discovered that actually animals all over the world also speak different languages. I thought dogs went woof woof in all countries. When I did this at one of our Jollof conferences though, and we did have people almost from all over the world. It was quite amazing, the different noises all the dogs made. Some of them were most bizarre. But that's quite interesting. But again, it's a way in to show children that the bits in the speech marks are the things that go in between the speech marks in their writing when they're doing prose. And we act out. So we go, you know, open the speech marks, nay, close the speech marks, said the horse. Okay, so you can act them out and do things like that with them. There's something called Kung Fu punctuation, which Becky Wilson, who's one of the Spanish trainer, does, which is brilliant. Lots of on a picture, there's a person and they're talking to their dog who is replying, and they put them in the speech bubbles, and then they've written underneath as a line of speech, and then the piece of work on the other side is a slightly older child, and they're getting into you know, writing speech much better. There is slight differences around the world in like the US and the UK about where you put the comma in speech. So if we have a UK and a US version, and it will differ slightly because the conventions are different. One would have thought we speak the same language. It's not true at all. It is different, but again, that is explained within, but that is why sometimes you will see the comma in the speech marks or outside of the speech marks. You know, there are things like that that you just learn as you go along, really. So again, with better, yeah, combining the things that we learn, better words, different words are said. If you get a story or something saying, Dada said this, Dada said that, Dada said the other, Dada something, okay. Said, I thought the children, oh, I'm so bored. Okay, so we look at all the different sorts of words we could use, and then you look at how does that affect the sentence. So I am going out, said inking. Okay. I'm going out, said inking. Why is that different? I'm going out, hissed inking. I'm going out, shouted inking. So we can go over all of them and get the meaning. Why does it change the sentence? You know, what does it do? Something simple, but you can get lots and lots of things from it. Enthused, I'm going out. She's obviously going somewhere she really wants to go. So, as I say, you just lots of playing about with words and with language. Now, I mentioned parsing. Okay, so parsing is where you identify the job the words on the screen are doing. So we can do that very easily with the colours. Now, that's why we've attached the colours to them. The nouns are in black, the adverbs in orange. As I said, on the computer you can do it easily. Highlighters, all that sort of thing. And you get, the children get very good at it because again, they have lots of practice at it. And actually that's fine for simple sentences. But as sentences get more complex, then, you know, it's not just enough to be able to identify that this is a noun or that this is something else. So actually what we do is we have something called our sentence walls, which will take the children through something called sentence diagramming, which is something that they can do when they're older and is, you know, something that a lot of grammarians at a higher level can also do. So we're building the blocks from very simple, just identifying simply words and sentences, through to be able to sentence diagram, you know, very complex sentences. So our sentence walls look like this. Again, the children get lots and lots of practice at it, so they become very good. It doesn't faze them at all. I'm going to simplify the wall for our course of today and just put some boxes up. So we've got the sentence, the little dog happily chased a tennis ball. And so the first thing we do, we've parsed it because we've underlined it or highlighted it or what we've ever done in all the little colours. And so we know what each word is doing. So then we start putting them into boxes. So the subject is the dog, because the dog is doing the chasing. The verb is chased, we know that, and it's got a verb ending on it, so that gives it away. And what is he chasing? He's chasing the ball. Okay, so then we can start putting the other words into places. So the and little go with the word dog, so the little dog. So that's a noun phrase, they're all together. A tennis ball, okay, another little noun phrase, that all goes together. Happily, it's the adverb, so that goes with the verb, he happily chased. Okay, so that's fine. However, if we make the sentence a little bit more complex and we say he chased the tennis ball into the sea, okay, okay, we know that sea is a noun and into is a preposition and everything, but so where do we put that in the boxes? The boxes are all full now. Okay, so if we look at that, we know that's a prepositional phrase. It starts with a preposition. It makes sense, but there's no verb. Okay, so then we have to think, right, he happily chased it where? So it's another thing telling us about the verb. Where did he chase it? So actually it goes into the adverb box, because it can actually also, be, as well as a prepositional phrase, it can also be an adverb called an adverbial phrase. And actually quite complex grammar. Certainly is very simple as far as the children are concerned, okay? If this is the first time you come across it, okay, you won't necessarily understand it the first time round, but don't worry about it. As I say, if you read the books and work through the books, each step is explained very simply, very gradually, and as I say, the children get really, really good at it. So, you'll be pleased to know, we are slightly over time, but my internet cut out, I do apologise. Children talk with Grolly grammar. What are we aiming for? We hope that the children that we are teaching will spell and punctuate more accurately, because they've got all this knowledge and practice that they've been doing. Okay? They will have a wider vocabulary, because we're not just talking about nouns, we are talking the whole language. They will produce better and more interesting pieces of writing, because that's what we've been encouraging them and training them to do. They will have a mastery of the language. They will not just be regurgitating things that they have already heard or seen. And they should have a clear understanding of how the language works, because that is what we have been teaching them. Okay? So hopefully, as I say, what I'm provided is just an overview of some of the things we do and some ideas of how you can use that outside of just the straight worksheets that we do, that are all explained, as I say, within the book. So that's me finished for the moment.
Thank you so much, Sara. So there are certain questions that we have received, and I will be putting those questions through. So one of the questions that I have received is which talks about the nouns. Why are we teaching proper nouns before common nouns? Is there a reason behind that? That we are covering that in Jolly Grammar?
Well, in some ways, no, because I mean, it's just a body of knowledge that we have to impart. But actually there is, in just the way that we build up the 42 sounds, and we start off with the ones that will make the most number of words. We started off because we were talking to them about capital letters, and we were talking to them about sentences. And of course, capital letters are at the front of proper nouns. So actually, it just moves on very nicely from there. It links in. And the children, you know, they all know what their name is. It's something that is very familiar with them. So we're starting with the familiar and the known, and then we move on, you know, to other things. The fact that it's their name, they're very happy with. And we then say, well, actually, you know, other things have got a name. The chair. Okay, it's not, doesn't need a capital letter. It's very important, but it's still a name to name that thing. So it just seemed a logical progression.
Thanks. Another question that I have is about a mixed class. So, you know, if a class has a good number of students, like 35 to 40 students, with a mix of slow learners also, how can we really do justice to Jolly Grammar, or how it would be able to help the class teacher in doing a good job in the class?
It depends on your situation and the number of children, or whether you have a classroom helper. Sometimes you just have to do it what they call differentiation by outcome. So actually what you expect of the less able children is not as much as the more able children. So you would only expect half a page of writing from the less able, but 1 or 2 pages from the more. You may be able to sit a classroom assistant or another teacher with them, which would be able to help them. I mean, sometimes we were very lucky in the school we were in because we could actually take groups out. And actually, some years we had groups that were really working from one the year below, because that was the level that they were at. But it, as with all things in teachers and in a mixed ability class, it's a juggle, and you have to expect certain things from different children depending, you know, on their ability and their age.
So the next, please have waters by the time I'm able to say the question. So the next question goes for vocabulary. Can you give some tips so that, you know, they have ideas to enhance vocabulary for the children, so that they're able to remember, they are able to use better words. So some more tips, if you can just add on. I know you have already given so many of them, but if you could.
Basically, it's not complex. The answer to that is very simply, and it's not very trendy these days, is repetition. And it's you know, choose the words that you want and you use them as often in as many different ways as you can, and don't just do a lesson on verbs or adverbs, whatever it is, you know, but then the adverb game, play it as often as you can. Actually, they say, even with native speakers of English, the way that they access vocabulary is reading. The more they read, the bigger and the better their vocabulary is, and the more they learn words. But it is just, it's practice and using it and just doing lots and lots of things with them, and not necessarily writing. I mean, I know we think about grammar with writing. We'll say, you know, it's doing things that you can do in the classroom that they can do in pairs, so that they get lots of practice, but not necessarily with you having to do the practice with them. You know, if they can practice in pairs or groups, or even, you know, they can go home sometimes and play the game with their parents or brothers and sisters. So they are getting a lot more practice than somebody just does it once in class.
I think this connects to my next question: how to conduct now on the online structure. So, so a few tips on, is it possible to connect with children and teach them the grammar concepts while they are at their homes, not school, not in the classroom?
Absolutely. I mean, really, many ways you do the same things. If you can see them on the camera, you know, you can call out words and you can watch them doing actions. You can do a lot of oral activities with them. If you're doing, you know, yes or no sentences, you've got the poll on some of the ones, you know, they can press yes or no. So you put can frogs swim, and they either press yes or no. You have to adapt what you're doing to the technology that you've got. Google, the Google Earth thing, walking around, that obviously, you know, lends itself very well if you're, you know, if they're using the internet and things. So it's just really doing the same things, but so that they, you just have to do it in a slightly different way. You know, they're not going to write a sentence, but they could type a sentence that everyone can see. You can put them into little breakout groups in a lot of the things that they use for for the schools. So put them into pairs or groups and ask them to have a discussion about or talk about. And as a teacher, you can drop into each group to make sure that they are doing what you've asked them to do and haven't started doing something else completely different. So yeah, there are lots of things. You just have to try and use the technology to the best that you can, given the circumstances that we all have.
Very right. So people are so mesmerized with Jolly Grammar till grade 6. Now they've started asking me how to put it into middle school. So can these, what all the tips and strategies can be used, and what kind of creative writing needs to be done in the middle school? So if you can just give some.
I mean, how quickly you progress through the grammar will depend on, how many lessons you've got and the ability of your children. And it could be that some people may not get through all the grammar like in 6 consecutive years, and actually you can use it higher up. If you need 2 years to go through grammar 4, that's fine. It can be used for the middle school. If they've gone all the way through, then their command of grammar and English actually is pretty good. And you really then should be able to do quite a lot of creative and other things with them. But again, take some of the things that we've done, but you just get them to do it at a higher level. So the writing the address for a character in a book, and writing a letter, and then writing a story, that could be done by middle people, but at a much higher level.
Yeah. So if we could just talk about, how can I say that now that as a teacher, I have achieved a good level of creative writing with my children. So any tips to really assess myself as a teacher that now, okay, all these things my children have started writing, now I can say I have achieved a level. So.
Well, I mean, really, as I say, there isn't a test to show your grammar, but the it is your children's writing that shows that you've taught it. And as I say, that there uses lots of adjectives and descriptive words. Isn't just very plain sentences. I can see a frog. I went to the park. That they have. A command of the language, and even when they start messing around with it and playing around with it, it may not always be right, but actually it shows mastery of it. That's how you master something, because you mess around and see what works. And actually you need a confidence to do that. You need to be quite confident in the language to have that ability to play around with it.
So we are almost nearing the end. And I hope I've covered all the questions, and I'd already sent so many questions to Sara, and she has already picked up those and made her presentation. So all the basic things were already covered. And I really want to thank you, Sara. This session has been a real eye-opener for all of us. You've really turned around the dull grammar concepts into lively activity-based session, and it's so easy to understand why Jolly Grammar is called the Active Grammar Program. Now it's really seeped in, and I myself felt at a point that I must be learning in your classroom. And I wanted to do it. But there were so many of our participants who have not been able to join the session today due to some technical problems. So we will be putting on the session there on Facebook, maybe with your permissions. But I feel that the need of the hour is to get the best from the world, and we at SAAR Education are really trying to do that. And it's been really great having you there, learning from you.